Connecticut East this week is supported by SCAD. This September, SCAD is partnering with Philomena's Restaurant of Waterford to promote Sober September. For every mocktail purchase, the proceeds will benefit SCAD's programs, supporting individuals and families on their path to recovery. Visit Philomena's or you can give directly. Learn more and donate at scad.org/ways to give. It's called the Yankee National Party and says it upholds the values of New Englanders and beyond. We talked to 3 local party members who live in the state and are part of the Connecticut chapter to find out more. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Politics in the US has become more and more polarizing over the years, in large part because the country only has 2 dominant political parties. Attempts to create a third party or provide alternatives to the Democrat and Republican parties have come and gone. Recently, a new party has emerged that is tackling the issues from a more regional viewpoint. It's called the Yankee National Party and says it upholds the values of people in the New England states and the northeast of the country. So who are they and what do they believe in? I caught up with 3 local Connecticut residents who are members of the Connecticut chapter of the Yankee National Party to find out more. Joining us on the podcast is Joshua Steele Kelly, Jason Kramer, a local business owner, and Tennyson Benedict, a lawyer who's a solo practitioner. To the 3 of you, ever so many thanks for joining us on Connecticut East this week. Joshua, I'm just going to start with you because people will know who you are from your other job. So just explain to us very quickly, because I know there's something that you want to say before we get into the conversation and the topics which we're going to be talking about.
Thanks, Brian. So, of course, many of you who are listening today will recognize and hopefully remember some of the great conversation that I had with Brian on 2 different occasions on this podcast, both speaking about the Thames Valley Council for Community Action, TVCCA. I am the CEO at that anti-poverty organization here in southeastern Connecticut. However, I'm here today speaking solely as an individual. My thoughts and feelings are absolutely no reflection on the agency or any of the other individuals that work or volunteer for the agency, and really happy to engage with this conversation just as a private citizen.
The 3 of you are members of what is called the Yankee National Party. A lot of people probably haven't heard of this party.
The Yankee National Party, I would describe it as an alternative to the choices being presented to us right now under the dominant 2-party system. It is a more regionally focused party with a stronger focus on the New England states in the Northeast and the interests that are perhaps unique to our region of the country, and seeks to protect the interests of the Northeast. There is, and this is something Josh can hop in and describe a little bit better than me, but there is a tie to the Scottish National Party, or I should say, inspiration drawn from the Scottish National Party. I think all 3 of us find focusing on protecting the Northeast very important, given the fact that the current administration in DC seems very intent on targeting the Northeast and punishing it for being more liberal, more progressive than the heartland of the country.
So, this political party, it's really standing up to the idea that seems to be coming from the federal government that people aren't worth investing in. And I believe that we have shared values here in the Northeast. We have 4 core values as a party, very value-driven party of independence, democracy, empathy, and sustainability. They're values that I believe the Northeast really rallies around. And no matter what political background you might come from, I think that you can ascribe to at least a portion of those values. And we believe that they're under attack from the way that the federal government's wheeling and dealing money, troops at this point, which is a very scary thing to say, and a variety of other policies. We believe that we need to really double down on protecting our way of life and our values here in the Northeast in the face of such decisions and actions at the federal level.
Jason, I want to bring you in as well. Can you give us your thoughts on why you wanted to become part of the Connecticut chapter of the Yankee National Party?
Well, looking at the climate around the United States right now, I was looking for something more than just sitting on my couch and praying that government overreach goes away, or that our democracy is somehow saved and restored by someone else. So I reached out to several groups, attended several protests, and I saw this on Reddit. This guy, Josh, starting a new party that was regionally centered, really focusing on my community because all politics are local, right? I loved how we're a value-centered party and focused on our region. And even if all my friends and family live here, there is no way that I'm interested in withdrawing immediately from the United States and starting a war, right? However, I am definitely interested in maintaining our regional resilience and looking at the things we need to do as a region to cooperate across state lines in order to be more productive and more self-sustaining over the long term as a region, because each individual New England state, with the exception of Massachusetts, is tiny in comparison to places like Texas or California. But with our pooled resources and our shared cultural values, we really can be a powerhouse of the world. And I trust my friends and neighbors here in Connecticut and across New England to even when we disagree, to at least be able to hold a reasonable conversation and allow direct democracy to shine through. And one of my personal pet projects that I really would love to see happen is ranked choice voting to allow parties like ours a greater say in the voice of politics across New England.
Is part of the problem that this nation is a nation of two dominant parties and has been for an incredibly long time? Is it part of the problem that when you go to vote, you have to register for a particular party? And I think that makes America unique in that regard, because that's basically saying you have to take a stand, you have to be one or the other.
You're locked out of the process unless you register with one of the two approved parties. So yeah, I mean, it is antithetical to the idea of democracy and representative democracies in the first place. And breaking that duopoly, I think, will create a much more sensible conversation around the things like what we'll be talking about today, in a way that isn't that where the two primaries drive us further left or further right, and then somehow we have to clean up these terrible ideas for the general election. Maybe it's time that a ranked choice voting scenario would give us all a greater opportunity to really focus on the issues and have data-driven solutions that are better for everyone in our region and hopefully will lead the way and across America.
So multifaceted, Brian. It's not just the fact that we have to register with political parties, but in Massachusetts, for example, when you run for a local office, you're not even listed on the ballot with a given political party. You might belong to one, but you're not even listed. In Connecticut, not only are you listed with a political party, so for example, I'm running for office this coming fall on the YNP line in Waterford, but the way that the ballot is constructed here in Connecticut is such that the major political party, whatever received the greatest number of votes for governor in the last election, is on line A, right at the top, where everybody's eye goes to first. The second runner-up is second, and everybody else descends from there. So the way that all of this is constructed is meant to keep minor parties out. It is specifically designed to keep the people who were on top, and to have everything else descend from there. It's really disheartening, but there are these policies that are being tried in Maine, in Alaska, that have been adopted in other parts of the world, including the United Kingdom and including Australia for generations at this point, where it's a really tried and true way to get a multi-party democracy to be healthy and vibrant.
I want to turn to Tennyson. Immigration is obviously a very big issue. We're constantly seeing stories about ICE agents nabbing people off the streets, etc. Tennyson, talk to us a little bit about that, because I know that you deal with immigration issues.
I have some immigration clients that I work with, and I have a background dealing with people who are seeking asylum in the United States. There's a lot of fear on the ground right now, and you don't have to be an expert in the immigration field to see the videos that are, circulating on the web of ICE agents with masks on their face, breaking into cars, ripping people out, detaining people who may be US citizens, may not be US citizens. They just happen to have the wrong accent and the wrong color skin, and they work in the wrong fields. The thing that drives me crazy as an immigration attorney, listening to the rhetoric, is it's very paradoxical. You listen to people on the right and they will say immigrants are stealing your benefits, they're lazy, they're taking things from you. And at the same time, they're stealing your jobs. In my experience with a couple of my current asylum clients, they're really afraid to go out of the house and they're afraid to go to their jobs. They're worried that they're going to get scooped up at any moment. And the ridiculous thing to me is when people are seeking asylum, there's a lot of information that they are required to tell the government. They're required to tell them where they currently live, if they're currently working. You have to provide all sorts of biographical information. Point being is there is a surveillance system already in existence for people who are trying to do things the legal way. And you're having people who are getting picked up in immigration court. Again, these are people who are going into court, they're following the rules, they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is go to court and litigate their case. And instead of being given the opportunity to litigate their case, whether it's an asylum petition or a convention against torture or withholding of removal, family-based petition, employment-based petition, you name it, they're getting punished for doing things the right way. And so it creates a perverse incentive to keep your head down and not affirmatively say, hey, I'm in the country, I came in, I might have come in on a visa, I might be overstaying my visa, but that's because I'm seeking asylum. It's really encouraging people to come here and then go underground. And it opens the door for people to be preyed upon by bad actors. I have a female client right now with children, and she has experienced emotional abuse from a former partner who threatens to call immigration and customs enforcement if she doesn't do what he wants her to do. It's really used as a cudgel against people who are trying to do the right thing, by and large.
We have the three of you on here, the Charlie Kirk incident, a terrible situation, whether you agreed with Charlie Kirk or not. It has become yet another polarizing situation here in the United States. Jason, give us your view on what you're seeing. You're involved in 5051 protests as well. Just give us thoughts on what you're seeing, what you're hearing on this particular issue.
It's fair to say that every organization I am currently involved in vehemently opposes political violence. Our political system was set up specifically to avoid the violence. It is not neighborly. It is not humane to be shooting at each other in the streets over a difference in ideas, even when those ideas can be characterized as hateful or racist. We disagree with the idea that we should be shooting at each other to settle our differences. We're also very alarmed at the fact that it took, I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but it took 5 minutes for them to hoist a warm body and start calling out for the death of Democrats or the left. And it's very alarming and terrifying for a lot of the younger people, single women, minority groups, and people that I work with on a daily basis to see that there is a certain thirst for our blood that seems to flow through the middle of the country, and they are terrified. Meanwhile, I believe it is our job to be prepared.
And when you say prepared, can you expand on what you mean by that?
Prepare our communities through community action, collective action groups, protest, organizing, gardening for food security, self-defense to give people the tools and confidence they need to defend themselves, be it with our Second Amendment or with the ability to confidently push away an attacker and flee for safety. These are all things that we as a group have been advocating for and working for on an individual basis on top of our organizations.
Joshua, part and parcel of why we're having this conversation. I know you fairly well, as I say, from previous interviews, and I was particularly struck by a posting that you put onto LinkedIn. Explain your thoughts behind it because it was eye-opening.
I really appreciate you taking an interest in that post to begin with. And for anybody who is listening to this and who is interested, Joshua Steele Kelly on LinkedIn, my page is public. You can see the post. I actually started writing it though, and it looked very different the first couple of sentences, first couple of tries than it did in the end because I kept trying to find the words and not finding it. But I wrote it initially because I had several individuals, specifically people from past workplaces, who reached out to me and said, and asked how I was feeling because I'm only a year younger than Charlie Kirk himself. I'm pretty politically outspoken. I very much did not agree with Charlie Kirk on pretty much any issue across any number of questions. But I'm also very outspoken on the Second Amendment. And actually, I believe that there should be more restrictions on guns. Not that guns should be taken out of everybody's homes and hoisted away and held by some centralized government, but I have been very outspoken about gun control before. So in writing this, I came to the conclusion that the thing that I am is angry. And I'm angry, I feel like, at pretty much everybody right now, which I think really is telling about the situation at hand. I'm angry that despite all of the advocacy that I've done and despite all of the rallies and protests and having grown up, I was still in high school when the Sandy Hook incident occurred and seeing nothing really come out of that. It leaves me angry at our lawmakers because they have a system where changes are supposed to be made and we're not seeing those changes occur. I'm angry at voters because we keep sending the same people back to our Senate and House and expecting different outcomes. I'm angry at Charlie Kirk to an extent for continuing his barrage of what I see as very hateful and bigoted messaging that occurred. And I've had a lot of people push back on me and say, go listen to what Charlie Kirk has to say before, really condemn him for some of the clips that are being taken out in the media. And to be honest, I have. And to be honest, I still find it all to be rather bigoted and hateful. But that's my perspective. He did not deserve to be shot by any stretch of the imagination for those feelings and his thoughts being shared. But I'm angry that we live in a society where we have come to such gridlock that some individual felt like they had no other choice than to take matters into their own hands and try to affect their own change. There's still lots more to be uncovered. I'm angry that the right and conservatives and Republicans on the whole took this as a very quick opportunity to start going after Democratic and leftist jobs, to start going after leftist and Democratic politicians. But I'm also very frustrated on the other side of the aisle with the lack of action, the lack of ability to very clearly articulate a path forward and a vision for this country that speaks to an improvement, that speaks to life being different than the status quo. I very much believe, and one of the reasons that I think all three of us are in a political party that is not one of the two major parties is because we're tired of the status quo. People in this country want to see change. And I called this out very specifically in my post. And it's up to voters to take a look at their options at the ballot box. Maybe it means voting for a party that you've never voted for before. Maybe it means in a primary voting against the guy that you voted for the last 20 some times because it's time just for a change. It's time for somebody else to step up and make a change. And I'm frustrated with our lawmakers that seem to be unwilling to go the extra mile to deliver something more than an introduced resolution or an introduced bill that gets shot down. Even here in Connecticut, even in a Democratic minority, which also we have had Democratic majorities since in one or both houses since Sandy Hook occurred, for sure, since Columbine many times, and still somehow nothing happens. It's a very disheartening and discouraging landscape right now. We've already discussed the fact that all three of us are white men. We're less likely to face things like hate crimes and such like that. And I think that's why we feel a real need to be the ones who speak out and say something. But honestly, this is scary. I have no idea what the reaction to these statements are going to be. I already had some reactions to the posts that I made online that were not necessarily threatening, but that were definitely negative to what I had to say about my frustration with the situation on the whole. And I know others that I had even asked to potentially join me today in the event that Jason or Tennyson weren't able to make it, who are educators who were not willing to come on and speak with you because they were afraid of what their school systems might be told by parents or kids that were listening. So it's a tremendously scary time. I can't agree more with Jason's sentiment that there needs to be some level of preparation. Even Senator Murphy recently said that he is afraid of the rhetoric that's coming out of Washington to a point that he wants to see communities prepared for what does it look like in the event that the National Guard is deployed to put down protests? What does it look like if this wave of statements around trying to get people fired over their reaction to a shooting spins out of control to the next level? We're in a situation right now where neighbors neighbors are not looking out for neighbors. And the federal government is definitely not looking out for its states, especially its Democratic voting states. And that makes it a very uncomfortable spot for Connecticut.
How big an issue do all three of you believe that the internet and social media plays into all of this?
Social media is a real problem. I mean, to the point when 5051, for example, announces a protest, there are immediate calls to, hey, protest doesn't work, stay home, there's nothing you can do. And who knows if these things are actual humans or a Russian bot farm? Nobody freaking knows. And how does one normal person who has a 9 to 5 or maybe two 9 to 5s and children and other things to do, how are they going to look in to see what is true, what is real, what is not real? And honestly, I don't have an answer other than get off the social media, please. And it's time to go out and participate in a protest, even if it is not an effective protest in terms of there is no change after the protest. I do have a strong case for a protest, and that is you will meet good people behind the scenes that are doing good work in your community right now that needs your help.
One thing that the founders and framers of the Constitution never foresaw was the impact of mass media and then social media, which is like mass media on steroids. The way that it can connect someone who thinks that political violence is the answer to their problems is a pretty small subsect of the population. And normally without social media, they would be very isolated from one another. The advent of social media means that one nut job with a rifle can come in contact with another nut job with a rifle and get inspiration from that.
And just before we move on to Joshua, and I just want to say this, whether you are somebody who is for or against gun ownership, there are plenty of responsible gun owners out there. We just want to make that clear.
And actually, to your point, Brian, about differences of opinion with guns, I actually have my gun permit, despite the fact that I am an advocate for greater gun control. My bottom line with greater gun control is, again, do things like prevent school shootings, which happen here at a much larger clip per capita than seem to happen anywhere else in the world. It's one of those double-edged sword items where the three of us would likely not know each other if it weren't for social media. But at the same time, especially after the shooting of Charlie Kirk, I mean, in under an hour, there were videos of his death that were posted that people probably trauma response to some extent, at least many. Social media is warping the way that we consume information at its face value. If you're getting information in real time, it suggests that you would know more, but it's just so hard to differentiate fact from fiction.
Jason Kramer, Tennyson Benedict, and Joshua Steele Kelly, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
And if you're interested in finding out more about the Yankee National Party and the Connecticut chapter, then visit their website at yankeenp.org/CT.
The more you listen to your kids, the closer you'll be. So we asked kids, what do you want your parents to hear?
I feel sometimes that I'm not listened to. I would just want you to listen to me more often and evaluate situations with me and lead me towards success.
Listening is a form of love. Find resources to help you support your kids and their emotional well-being at sounditouttogether.org. That's sounditouttogether.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Pivotal.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. Roderick Marriott, the former director of the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection's Drug Control Division, has been identified in a Freedom of Information request as the person who ordered his staff to investigate Affinity Grow, based in Portland, Connecticut, just 24 hours after its CEO, Reno Ferrarice, spoke at a public hearing in March of this year. The unannounced inspection was seen as retaliatory after Ferrarice had criticized DCP about how they wished to test cannabis product for the adult use market as part of a wider-ranging bill they had put forward to the legislator. In the FOIA documents, Marriott admitted to mishearing part of Ferrarice's testimony about final form testing a product when he decided to order the inspection. Two agencies sent to the company later reported they had found no irregularities. The inspection sent chills through the cannabis industry in the state, leading to Brian Caffarelli, the commissioner of DCP, to make public and private apologies, saying the inspection should not have happened. Merritt was to be disciplined for his poor judgment, according to the documents, but resigned his position instead after 17 years with the agency. Community health centres in Connecticut and nationwide are coming together to fight for funding. Edwin J. Vieira from the Public News Service reports.
With federal budget talks at an impasse, this could equal lost funding for these centers, which fill gaps in the healthcare system. In Connecticut, the 17 community health centers in the state provide care for around 452,000 people, regardless of whether they're insured. Deb Pollen, with the Community Health Center Association of Connecticut, says the possible funding cuts can create some challenges.
Federal funding helps to pay for our staff, and without our staff, we cannot provide services to people in the community. Although we do have other revenue sources, including commercially insured patients and our Medicaid patients, we do need the federal funding as well. It all fits together.
Without those funds, health centers would have to dip into their reserves, which are limited since they're nonprofits. However, health centers face other challenges from cuts in the federal budget megabill passed in July. This bill creates 4 million more uninsured patients, equal to a $7 billion funding gap in the next decade. I'm Edwin J. Vieira.
Meanwhile, several northeastern states and America's largest city have been collaborating since early 2025 and formally announced the Northeast Public Health Collaborative recently, a voluntary regional coalition of public health agencies and leaders brought together to share expertise, improve coordination, enhance capacity, strengthen regional readiness, and promote and protect evidence-based public health. The regional partnership, which was informally established several months ago, held its first in-person meeting in Rhode Island in August. The collaborative has already formed interjurisdictional working groups to identify opportunities for collaboration and shared planning across multiple public health disciplines, including public health emergency preparedness and response, vaccine recommendations and purchasing, data collection and analysis, infectious disease, epidemiology, and laboratory capacity and services. Voluntary coalition members include Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York State, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and New York City. The parent company of Yale New Haven Health and 4 other hospitals in Connecticut and Rhode Island have agreed to pay $18 million to settle a class action lawsuit regarding one of the largest medical data breaches in history. The settlement, which must be approved by a federal judge, calls for Yale New Haven Health System to immediately deposit $9 million into a fund and another $9 million within 45 days of the settlement's final approval to pay damages to more than 5 million people whose personal information may have been stolen in the breach. In a statement, Yale New Haven Health Services said the types of data stolen in the cyber attack varied from and may have included names in combination with one or more of the following details: address, telephone number, email address, date of birth, race or ethnicity, patient type, medical record number, and or social security number. There was no unauthorized access to its electronic medical system and no financial information was compromised in the incident, according to the health system. Yale New Haven Health have written letters to everyone whose data was compromised. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.